right. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome everybody. Welcome to our Roadrunner talk today. We're so excited to see so many people here. Looks like we have a few more people coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So I'll introduce our speaker for today. We have Leticia Hanada coming in to talk about her work on Libras. So Leticia is not a student here at UNM, although she's been doing great so far. She is a visiting student from the University of Campinas in Brazil. She's been working with the deaf community there for about 4 or 5 years now. She completed her bachelor's at the University of Campinas and is currently working on her master's right now. She started last year. So Leticia has been working on a couple different projects related to Libras and the deaf community. Previously, she worked on researching how deaf people in Brazil learn written Portuguese, helping with literacy skills, specifically focused on getting educators to understand that for many deaf people, Portuguese in Brazil is their second language, not their first language. And so working on how they acquire like number agreement in nouns, and I believe some other agreement features like on verbs, if I'm remembering correctly. But her more recent work has been on Libras itself, focusing a lot on non-manual expressions for things like semantic intensification in negatives, in interrogatives, and other uses. She's also been comparing how deaf users of Libras differ in their use of non-manual markers compared to like hearing interpreters, for example. So currently she's working on how these non-manual markers are used in new information as well as contrastive focus in Libras. And while she's here in the US, she's been working on how non-manual markers are used for intensification in ASL. So we are very excited to hear all about her work, and I will now pass the floor on over. Before I do that, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to wait until the end of her presentation during the Q&A section to kind of go over those questions. But if you have something that you really want to ask about, feel free to put it in the chat and we will respond to that during Q&A. So Leticia, please take it away.
Thank you, Devin. I'm gonna share my screen. Please tell me if you can't see. Oops.
So while Yvette gets that loaded for us, would you like to just kind of tell us a little bit about your work?
Sure. So first, I would like to thank you, Devin, for the invitation. It's a really good opportunity for me. Since I'm here in the US, it's a really good opportunity and experience. So thank you so much. So today I'm going to present the project of my master's degree in Brazil. My project is called Visual Prosody in Brazilian Sign Language, Libras. The difference between non-manual expressions in contexts of focus of new information and contrasted focus. So this project I'm doing with Dr. Plinio Barbosa that is here. Thank you, Plinio, for coming. I know the difference between time zones is really hard, so thank you to being here. And well, my project is financed by Research Support Foundation of the state of São Paulo. And my university is University of Campinas. And then I'm gonna wait for the slides to start my presentation, okay? Okay, thank you, Yvette. I can see now. So this is the information I already talked about. My project is called Visual Prosody in Brazilian Sign Language, the difference between the use of non-manual expressions in context of focus, of new information and contrastive focus. You can go to the next one. Okay. And so before really start talking about my project, I think I need to talk a little bit about the 5 parameters in sign language. I know there are some researchers here that already studied the phonetic and phonological aspects of sign languages, but I think maybe there is someone that doesn't know it. So I think it's important to talk a little bit briefly about these 5 parameters. So the 5 parameters in sign language is what make a sign. So when I'm going to produce a sign, I need to produce these 5 parameters. The 3 first parameters were stipulated by Stokey, and it is the hand configuration, hand location, and movement. And then Bateson and Friedman, they added the hand orientation. And finally, Baker-Shank and Cockley, they added the non-manual expressions. So accordingly, the non-manual expressions, the non-manual expressions would be to describe aspects that goes beyond the movement of the hands. So just to give an example, in Libras, there is the sign to learn that is like this. I don't know if everybody's seeing me, but I hope so. So the sign for learn is this in Libras. So it's a hand configuration in S, a location in front of the forehead, and a movement like this. The hand orientation is with the palm looking down, and the non-manual expressions is a neutral facial expressions. If I change just one of these parameters, it turns into a new sign. So for example, if I change just the hand location and put in front of my mouth, it would turn into orange or Saturday in Libras, okay? And so the parameter that I'm going to analyze in my study is the non-manual expressions. You can go to the next one. Okay, so the non-manual expressions, they can work as prosody. So I brought a phrase from Wilcox and Wilcox, and they say like metaphorically, we could understand non-manual expressions like prosodic change such as voice qualities, intonation, and rhythm in an oral language. So I bring just 2 examples to understand better this idea. So when you think intonation in spoken languages, we always think about sequences of high and low tones that are associated with tone-bearing unities. So it would be like in a suprasegmental way, or in the entire sentence, or in a syntagma, for example. So I brought an example of Brazilian Portuguese because in English it doesn't work, since when we turn an affirmative sentence into an interrogative sentence, it has the do, like, do you like it? So it doesn't work in English, but I brought in Portuguese, and I'm going to translate for you to understand. So the sentence would be, ela gosta de bolo, which means she likes cake in English. So if I want to turn this affirmative sentence into an interrogative sentence in Brazilian Portuguese, I'm gonna do like, the affirmative would be like, ela gosta de bolo, and the interrogative would be, ela gosta de bolo. So the words are exactly the same in the same order. The only difference between those 2 types of sentences are the intonation of the voice. And the same thing would happen in Libras or in another sign languages. So cake she likes would be like, cake she likes. And if I want to turn it into a question, would be, cake she likes. And so I would just change my facial expressions and my body movements to turn this affirmative sentence into an interrogative sentence. And we have also stress in prosody, right? And the stress is commonly used to highlight an information. So for example, to emphasize a constituent in a clause, or to contrast it with information that has previously being provided in the discourse. So when you talk about spoken languages, we usually remember of the increase in loudness, pitch, and vowel lengthening. But in sign language, if I want to emphasize a sign, I could or increase the signs of the sign, the duration and the speed, to make a sharp boundary, to do repetition, higher location and space, and other non-manual behaviors such as raised eyebrows, puffed cheeks, body lean, and head nod. So I'm going to analyze the non-manual expressions when they have this, when they work like prosody in the Brazilian Sign Language. You can go to the next. Thank you. Okay, so we already understand how prosody and non-manual expressions works in a sign language, but the object of my research is the focus. So the non-manual expressions, they can express a lexical differentiation, participation in syntactic construction, and contribution to intensification processes. So for example, lexical differentiation would be the example that I gave before, like with learn and orange, and contribution to intensification process. Okay, it would be can you come back? Okay, thank you. So intensification process is the project that I'm doing nowadays in the UNM with Dr. Erin Wilkinson. That is, for example, she's beautiful, or she's really beautiful. And the syntactic constructions, there are a lot of different ways that the non-manual expressions can perform, such as yes and no questions, WA interrogative sentence, relative clauses, topicalizations, agreement, and focus. And focus is what I'm going to look in my research. Besides that, it's important to highlight that non-manual expressions, they are also responsible for express feelings such as joy, anguish, anxiety, suffering, disapproval, etc. But in my project, I'm not going to analyze emotions. I'm going to analyze non-manual expressions when they want to express focus. You can go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about focus. So focus in a general way, we can understand like an informational structure of a sentence that can be highlighted due to several reasons, such as being a new information, a constant element in a narrative, or a contrasting element in the mind of the interlocutors. So there are a number of perspectives of the phenomenon of focus. So we can see focus from a perspective from semantic, pragmatic, syntactic, discursive, and prosodic aspects. But my project will focus in the syntactic and the prosodic perspective of focus, mainly in the prosodic aspect. So from a prosodic point of view, according to Zeykendorf and Barbosa, there are two kinds of focus. That is the narrow focus. So the narrow focus, it's when the word in focus is smaller than a syntagma. So for example, in the phrase, Mary bought a yellow house, if I ask, what is the color of the house that Mary bought? So the answer would be yellow. So the focus would be just in the word or sign yellow. So that is a narrow focus. The broad focus is when the prominence is performed in a unity that is smaller than a sentence in focus in a standard position of phrasal stress. So the question would be, what Mary bought it? And then the answer would be in the entire a yellow house. I'm talking about these two kinds of focus to be clear that in my research, I'm going to analyze just the narrow. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So there are also a lot of different focus, like for example, expansive focus, restriction and selecting, and broad focus. So there are a lot of different focus, but I'm going to focus in just two. That is the focus of new information and the contrastive focus. So now I'm going to explain a little bit about the difference between those two kinds of focus. In the focus of new information, this focus is important to assess the truth of an expression. So an example to better understand that. So in the sentence like, my mother loves dogs. The second column is just a gloss, how would be produced in the Libras order, okay? So the question would be, who loves dogs? So the person who, sorry, just to return a little bit, the statement that is, my mother loves dogs, is the information that is inside of the person mind, okay? And then there's someone that you talk about this information a while ago. So this person knows that someone in your life loves dogs, but doesn't remember exactly who. So this person is asking who loves dogs because this person wants to receive a new information, right? And then you would answer, that is your mother that loves dogs. So you're giving a new information to the question. In the contrastive focus is a little bit different. Oh, they slide cut my sentence, but the contrastive focus is produced when the person that is asking you have information about the statement or the information, right? They have this information, but they have in an incorrect way. So the question would be, your father loves dogs? So it's just in the intuition to confirm the information that this person has about it. And then in the contrastive focus, you would negate the information, the part of information that this person has that is wrong, and then correct with the right information, that is, it's not my father, it's my mother that loves dogs. And I put in two different colors to highlight that in this case, my mother would be a new information in both cases, because the person is trying to correct in the contrastive focus to correct the information that the person has. So it's kind of new information, but it's also negating the information that the person has. And the loves dogs would be like an old information. It's information that is right, and the person that you're talking with already have about the statement. And in the focus of new information, I'm gonna use WA questions to elicitate the focus. So would be like who, when, what, okay? And in the contrastive focus is different because you have a set of possibilities. So the person that is questioning you, they have like they have a set of possibilities of people in your life that may love dogs, and this person choose one possibility to confirm the information. So it could be my cousin, my son, my grandfather, and he choose father, and to try to confirm this information, okay? You can go to the next slide. Okay. So the hypothesis of my work is that in contrastive focus, the non-manual expressions would be produced with more emphasis than in the focus of new information context. Because in the focus of new information, you just give the information that the person is asking for. And in the contrastive focus, you have to deny the information and correct, and to give the right information. So it's two things together. So that is the reason why my hypothesis is that maybe in contrasted focus, since you have to do two things together, you maybe want to be more expressive, to be more clear, right? So the goal of my master's degree project, as I said before, is to analyze the nominal expressions that when they perform different focus, and to understand if there are different significant difference in the production of these two contests. Besides that, I also want to understand if there will be any difference when these focus are performed in different parts of the sentence, such as subject, verb, object, adnominal, or adverbial adverb. So for example, in that phrase that my mother loves dogs, I could ask, your mother loves cats, or your mom hates cats. So I'm going to elicit different parts of the sentence and to understand if there is any difference when the focus is in different parts of the sentence. Besides that, I have some little hypotheses that I want to see if they are confirmed or not. The first one is about the focus of new information. Like I said before, I'm going to elicitate this focus with the WA questions. And in Libras, the WA questions like what, they are very likely to appear in the last position of the sentence, in the right position, sorry. So would be this phrase like, my friend bought a car. It would be like, in Libras, it would be friend mine buy what? If I want to ask, what did your friend bought it? So the what would appear in the last position of the sentence. So this is there are already some studies that says that it's likely that the WA questions in Libras appear in the right position of the sentence. So considering that, maybe we can, the new information that the person is going to give is going to replace the W question, right? It would be friend mine buy car. The car would replace the what. So my first hypothesis is in new focus of new information, maybe the word or the sign that is in focus would appear in the right position because of the WA question. In the contrastive focus, I already have some assumptions. Topicalization is really, really common in Libras. And I was wondering that maybe when they answered the question about anything, like, for example, did your friend bought a motorcycle? They could answer with or topicalization or cleft sentences. That the answer would be, it's a car that my friend bought it. So in Libras would be, car friend might bought it. So it would appear in the beginning of the sentence, right? Or it could be appears as a pseudo-cleft sentence. So you could, the participant could answer, what my friend bought is a car, not a motorcycle, or without another motorcycle. So it would be like in Libras, like a rhetorical question. It would be like, friend mine bought what? A car. So there's this possibility too. So I want to see if those things are going to happen or not. And the last hypothesis that I have is the difference between new and old information. Do you guys remember that I highlighted in yellow and blue? So I think in Libras it's very common when you want to contrast two different things. You put them in two different spaces when you're signaling. So if I want to talk about a difference between the cat and dogs, I would put dogs here and cats here to contrast them. So since they're in both in focus of information and contrasted focus, there are the old and the new information. Maybe they can produce what they consider new. That would be the sign in focus, right? For example, it's my mom that loves dogs. So they could produce my mom in one side and loves dogs in the other, but it's just me wondering some stuff. I'm not sure, and I'm gonna to confirm that when I have the results. You can go to the next. Okay, so I already I also brought some examples of how focus is expressed in Libras. There are already some works that talk about it. So for example, if someone asks you, can you go to the grocery store? You can go, answer with focus with I can, go, can. So you would duplicate the sign that you want to be in focus. So I want to see if this also happens both in focus of information and contrastive focus. And the second figure is the first line is the sentence, Mary read Agatha Christie. I don't know how to pronounce in English. And the second line would be no, Harry Potter Mary read in the Libras order, or in English would be no, Mary read Harry Potter. So as I said, in this case, this woman, she put Harry Potter in a topical way, right? So there are already some works about it, but I want to see, they don't describe focus with a lot of details, and I want to see more closely how focus work in Libras. Next. Okay, so how I'm going to create my experiment. I'm going to create 20 statements and 20 questions about these statements, and they will be written in glosses. Glosses, for if there's someone that doesn't know, is a simplified translation of sign language morphemes into oral language morphemes. So there are a lot of people that ask me, why don't I record the statements and the questions in Libras, and then the participant just answer also in Libras. And the reason why is because in Prosody, we have a lot of imitation. So maybe there's a possibility of the participant to watch the video of the statement, to watch the video of the question, and to maybe thinking like, oh, this is how those are the non-manual expressions that in the video the person recorded with some sign. So I'm gonna do the same since it's in the video. So I just want to avoid imitation in my corpus. That is the reason why I'm going to use statements written in glosses, so they can produce freely and naturally the way they would produce in real life situation, right? And as I said before, I think I already said this part, I'm going to select 10 key signs, 10 for new information, focus of new information, and 10 for contrastive focus. And for these key signs, I'm going to select signs that are in the position of subject, verb, object, adnominal adverb, sorry, and adverbial adverb. Okay, and besides that, I will, in the contrastive focus, specifically, I'm going to select signs that are similar. Because, for example, maybe the person remembers that is your, thinks that is your father, not your mother, because both signs have the same hand configuration. So the person knows that the sign you produce was with this configuration in ASL, right? And so father and mother, they have the same hand configuration. That is the reason why maybe the person get confused and said father instead of mother. So that is the reason why I will also select signs that look like each other. So in Libras, a lawyer would be like this, and dentist would be like this. So they have the same hand configuration and the same movement, and they are really closely. Maybe that is, I think will make more sense with my experiment. And the same thing happens with study and interpreter. For example, are you going to the school to study or to interpret? So study in Brazilian Sign Language is like this, and interpreter is like this. So they are also very similar. There are also the gray and brown in school and church, and both looks like each other a little bit. They're not that different. Besides those 20 statements and 20 questions, I'm also gonna create some 30 statements and 30 distraction questions. So our statements and questions that I won't analyze, but it will be present for the participant doesn't notice what I want for the participant to produce. So he doesn't notice what I'm analyzing. And in those distraction statement and questions, I'm going to create other forms of focus. For example, broad focus, intensity, emphasis, restricting, selecting, or expanding focus. Next. Okay. This part I already explained, but I'm going to pass by briefly. So how am I going to elicitate the focus of new information and contrasted focus? In the focus of new information, I'm going to tell the participant to think in a context in which they are aware of what happened, or they are aware of the information of the statement. And then someone else comes to, a friend maybe, comes and this person knows partially what happened. And this person will ask a question about the statement, and you have to answer this question. Look into the camera. The same thing with contrastive focus, but the only difference is that the person that is going to ask you about the information thinks that knows the information, but knows that incorrectly. So in the statement, I'm gonna ask to the participant, read the sentence and sign to the camera. And the reason why is because I also, after I collect data, I want to analyze the difference between the statement that is a sentence without focus with the answers of this of the question, sorry. So this answer would be the sentence with the focus that I want to analyze, and the statement would be the sentence without the focus. So I want to compare if they really change with their non-manual expressions. So in the question, the participant is only going to read and understand. They don't need to produce to the camera. And in the answer, as I said, he, she, or them have to answer the question to look into the camera. And I'm going to record both the statement and answer. Next. So I'm going to collect data of 10 deaf participants, 5 men and 5 women, in the adult age group, that is from 18 years old to 65, that are fluent in Libras, born and raised in the same region. So these individuals, they have to have an identity with the deaf culture, or with the deaf community. And this identity will be measured. I know that we cannot measure identity, but it's a way to try to measure it, but through a form with demographic and personal information, such as contest of use of Libras, a self-assessment of their fluency in Libras, so how they think, if they think they are fluent in Libras, how long they have expressed themselves in Libras, and how old they were when they learned Libras as first language. I'm also going to ask frequency of contact with the deaf community, and if they have Brazilian Portuguese as second language, since my experiment is going to use written glosses in Brazilian Portuguese. Right. Next. So this is a picture I took from my work when I was undergrad, and in the I don't know if you can see, but there's some lines in the left that is read in Portuguese. So it's a program I can look at different things at the same time. So I'm gonna look at the Brazilian Portuguese sentence. The second is the Libras, so would be like the Libras order, the written glosses, right? And then the non-manual expressions that are eyes, nose, cheeks, mouth, head and torso, and I forgot of the name of this one in English, but is okay, you got it. So in my work in my undergrad, when I was undergrad, I took all the work in this program. But in my master's project, I intend to use this program just for the manual science. And I know you must be asking me, but your work is about non-manual expressions, so why are you going to look at the science? So I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes. But before, I want to talk about, you can go to the next slide. Before, I want to talk a little bit how I'm going to measure the facial expressions. So there are two programs, the Face Reader program and the Emotions program. I didn't decide yet which one I'm going to use it. I still talking with specialists from those programs to understand which of them are better for my project, but both of them work in the same way. So we have this picture that is about the six prototypic emotional facial expressions. That is anger, disgust, fear, joy, sadness, and surprise. Those six facial expressions, they are prototypic emotional in the whole world. So they work everywhere. But like I said, I'm not going to look too emotional. For that, you can go to the next slide. The program also have the facts action unities coding system. So they have a little, they have a big description, a really good description about face expressions movements. So I brought here for you to check just some of them. They have more. And next slide. The program also can analyze two action units together. So the first, for example, the first one is the action unity from the slide before, that is 1, and action unity 2, and they together combined, they looks like this first. The program also measures the intensity degrees. So they mark which action unity or which combination of action unity the participant produced, and they also put in a scale of intensity. If it was slight, pronounced, severe, or max, really intensified expression, facial expression. Next. So like I said, I'm also going to analyze the manual signs, because when someone wants to express themselves in a sign language, they do all of that together. They don't just do signs, or they don't just do no-manual expressions. They do no-manual expressions and also manual signs all together to express a meaning they want to express, right? So that's the reason I will analyze. And because, like I said before, when you want to put stress in a sign in a word, you can increase the size, duration, speed of manual sign, create a sharp boundary to do repetition, or to put in a higher location in space. So for that, I based my template. You can see in the second image is a template that I created with amplitude levels. So how the amplitude, if the person produces the sign here or here. And this template was based in the signaling space and the 4 main areas of articulation of the signs created by, I think it's Quadro and Carnops. I can see it. Yeah, it's Quadro and Carnops. And then I will apply this template in the video of the participant. So this template is to understand if the participant is producing for example, the sign that he produced in the statement that is without focus. If he made here in the space, I want to see if in the context of focus, he's going to produce the same sign here in the same way, or here that is more with more amplitude. So for this, I'm going to analyze duration and amplitude of, okay, thank you, Devin. I'm gonna I'm going to analyze the duration and amplitude of both manual signs and non-manual expressions. Next. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to analyze duration and amplitude between both signs and non-manual expressions, and then we will analyze those amplitude and duration and the statements and in the focus of new information answers. So like I said, statements has no focus. So I will pick some, for example, one participant and look how he produced the statement and the focus of new information answer. The same thing for contrasted focus. And then I will analyze just the answers of focus of new information and contrasted focus. So for example, in that table that I present, my mother loves dogs, I'm going to analyze those two, my mother loves dogs, in the focus of new information and contrasted focus to compare them and see if there is a significant difference. And I'm also, like I said, I'm going to analyze the positions of the manual signs in both contexts. And I will put all these values in a table. The duration of the signs I will analyze by the eLearn program and the amplitude by the template that I show you. And the duration and amplitude of the non-manual expressions will be collected by the program, since they already gave me if the person produced a non-manual expression and in which intensity, right? And then I will put those values in a table, in an Excel table, and I will run the R program, and I will use the two-way analysis of a variance test, that is the ANOVA, to understand if there are really different, significant difference between all those four groups that I'm showing here. And next slide. Well, just to show the reference if someone wants to, but that's it. That's my project. And let's go to if someone has any question, you can just ask me.
All right, thank you so much, Leticia. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, come on screen, or put it in the chat. I see David has raised his hand. Go ahead, David.
Yes, hi. Let's get set up here. Can everyone see me clearly? Okay, great. So, perfect. I liked your presentation and I was really, really happy to see that it kind of matches with the paper, I'm looking at like Black ASL and how Black ASL is what is the fluency and how people are using non-manual markers within Black ASL. So I see that yours, the pictures that you have with the different facial expressions, that's really, really great to show those prototypical facial expressions as well as the prototypically with the amplitude. So I really like those two. I think that's going to help with my project and my paper. I really think that work was beneficial and will help me in analyzing Black ASL. That's a lot. How did you decide to use those? And with the facial captures systems, what were those three again that maybe helped with recognition? I think that helped a lot, especially with research, especially in Black signers. So I just wanted to say thank you and see what you offer for that.
Okay, thank you so much for being here, David. And I'm thinking you're talking about the face reader program and the iMotions program. Yeah.
Yes, I believe those were them.
Okay, so I met a researcher in Brazil, and she doesn't analyze sign languages, but she does analyze the intonation of voice together with facial expressions. So hearing people speaking in Brazilian Portuguese, when they do a question, they also change their faces. So she wants to analyze both prosodic and intonation aspects of Brazilian Portuguese, but also the facial expressions they made. And it seems really interesting because it seems to be different in every country. I think maybe there were some studies about Asian countries. They have a different way to express themselves. So they also, their facial expressions are also different from the Occidental, right? So that is how I found the programs. If I want, I can write in the chat the name of the programs for you to save it. But thank you.
Yes, that'd be great. If you could
That's
send
the
it to me,
question.
that'd be great. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, yes. And then one other question as well, with the body movements. There was a program that you were using to do the measurements of the amplitude and stuff as well. That picture that you showed me, does your program that you use to use that? If you could type that in the chat as well, that'd be great.
Okay, so it's not a program, because I was talking with the creators of Emotions and Face Reader, and they said to me that I think it doesn't exist a program for body movements just for face, because I think face is really important for psychological studies of behavioral stuff. So they didn't pay attention in the body, but what I'm going to do in my project is I took the template of a book that it's two researchers in Brazil. They describe the signaling space that is here. It's where most signs are located in this space. And then I just took it, the same signaling space that is described, and create a template in the Paint, because I'm not that technological, but and then I just put the same template above the video, so I can see with the template that I created if he's producing the sign here, the same person, or he's producing the sign here. Okay.
Great, great. Thank you. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Giving me ideas. So thank you so much for your help. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, David. Are there any other questions? Oh, I think David's asking if you could put the name in the chat, the programs that you were talking about.
That way I can save them.
Cool. Okay, do we have any other questions? I have a couple of questions, give some people time to think a little bit more. First off, so when you were talking about finding participants for your study, and you had this kind of screening process, they have a questionnaire to fill out. And one of them I remember was asking about fluency in Libras. And maybe this is just my background working with like people from Taiwan, Taiwanese sign language users. Sometimes can be very humble, like they are, you know, deaf, they grew up signing, but they say, oh, my TSL, my Taiwan Sign Language isn't that great. So I'm just sort of wondering, you know, these are kind of like cultural differences. And I'm just wondering, you know, how do you deal with that? Like maybe they might say that they're not that good at, you know, Portuguese or at Libras, but you know, no, they're fine. They can do both. They can do these tasks, but maybe they just don't report it that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it is. So the participants that I collected before in the other studies, I didn't have any problem with that. I just asked and I was like, do you consider yourself fluent? And in which level do you think you're start to learn now, or you think you already have the domain of the language? If you think you have the domain, you can express yourself freely in Libras, then you can be part of my research. But I understand your question, because my first project that I studied was about the Brazilian Portuguese written by deaf people. And then I think it was a really hard question, because they were ashamed of how they write in Portuguese, because it's their second language, not the first. And the school has a major influence in how they think they can write. So I have I struggle a lot to find deaf that want to be part of a written Portuguese project, right? They were like, I don't think I write good enough for your project. I was like, that is not what I'm looking for. You don't have to be worried about it. Thank you, Devin.
Yeah, for sure. I do have one more question before I ask that, though. I want to give anyone else one chance to ask. Yeah, so if there's anyone who would like to throw in a question before we move on. Looks like Jill has come on screen. Hi, Jill. Good afternoon.
Oops, I better undo my background. Okay. Hey, Leticia, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really interesting. And my question concerns like the units that might be in contrastive focus. I wouldn't have thought about it, except that your examples often included like noun phrases with multiple words in them. And I wondered, like, do you anticipate that these non-manual features of Libras will spread over all the signs in the whatever the phrase is that is getting contrastive focus? Or do you think that signers will really just like pull out one element to put the, to change or modify the contrastive focus on? Thanks.
So let me see if I understand. So the question is like, how am I going to ensure that they are going to produce non-manual expressions in contrastive focus?
No, it's more just, I'm just curious whether you get kind of prosodic effects across a whole phrase, or whether you typically only get those prosodic effects on a single sign or a single word in spoken language. And like, how are you going to know in advance, like to narrow your focus only to like one element of these phrases, or are you going to like actually encode all of the elements of these phrases?
Okay, now I get it. Thank you. I presented the difference between the narrow and the broad focus, right? So how I'm going to be ensured that they're going to be to express a narrow focus and not a broad is the type of the question that I'm going to do. So if I ask like, what did Mary bought it? The person would answer, Mary bought a yellow car. So this is the broad. But since I'm not asking a question about what did she bought it, but what is the color, they will have to put focus in just one word. So I think it's how I created the questions that'll be sure that they produce the narrow focus. Plinio, if you want to talk, you can. Plinio is my supervisor in Brazil.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I understand the question. It's the question of the domain of focus, because when you do a focus in an oral language, as in the examples you gave, like it's my mother, not my father, or it's a yellow thing. And normally, not only we put a focus in the word we want to put it, but we also decrease the gestures for after the focus. It's not only put a focus on the word, but doing something in the vicinity of these words, then I think when you be able to compare the neutral sentence with the sentence in focus, we also will see things happening outside the immediate domain of focus. I think that's the question of Jill's question related to. Is that so? It's important to see around, not only on the focus item, but around it.
Oh yeah,
It's
They
the
have
same thing when in the word, in the domain of the word, when you put intensify the focus in a two-syllable word in Brazilian Portuguese, you increase the gestures of the stressed syllable and decrease the gestures of the post-stressed syllables. It's a combined thing, and it's not restricted to a single place. It affects the vicinity, and I think it's fundamental to investigate what happens around the domain of immediate domain of focus, in my sense.
So
Yeah.
it sounds like there's additional questions to be pursued beyond this project. Thank you, Leticia.
Thank you, Jill and Plinio. Yeah, I agree with Plinio. I think we had to consider the co-articulation, right? So when, for example, if I put the focus in a sign that is in the middle of the phrase, for example, a verb, it can be produced with more amplitude, and then the last sign would be produced also with more amplitude because of the verb that was before, the sign that was before. So yeah, thank you, Jill and Plinio.
Okay, I think we are just about out of time. Unfortunately, this was really interesting stuff. But if you have some more questions for Leticia, feel free to reach out to her. If you want, you can put your email in the chat, and everyone can reach you there. So hopefully get to see everyone again. Thank you all for coming, and yeah, have a great weekend.